I've told my kids this story, and the kids, they think that I'm telling them this story to behave. But when my parents told me that, you got to keep in mind that I was a teenager at the time, so it didn't really matter.
Right.
I was going to do whatever I wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a story about this Native American woman. Wasn't even that long ago of a story that she lived in this mobile home trailer house thing on the reservation. Has this kid. The kid's misbehaving. And she's telling this kid, you better be good, or I'm going to put you outside for the giant owl to take you. And the kid's, like, doesn't give a shit. So the kid's being an ass. And then finally the mom's, I've had enough. So the mom decides, I'm going to put the kid outside the front porch, close the door, terrify the kid. Open the door, good kid. You know what I mean? So in the story, the lady does that. And supposedly my mom and dad say that they've heard this story, like a true thing. I don't know. I can't ask them. They're gone. But close the door, opens the door, kid's gone. Kid is just nowhere. There's no sign of a bird that took him or anything like that. But that was the story that I'm going to let this owl take you. Close the door, kid was gone. So, and mom and dad are telling me this story, and I'm like, okay, but part of the story is that if this is the first time you've heard this story, then the owl will show itself to you. So, again, as I said on Jeremiah's thing, if this is the first time you guys heard the story, keep an eye out. Maybe you'll see this thing. And at the time, me and Cassie, we were going to Gregory, South Dakota. We visited my parents down there because they were visiting my aunt. So we talked to them for a few hours because they were closer than where we were. Because I already lived here in this town. They lived like 2.5 hours from here. It was like an 1.5 hour drive there. So I was like, save an hour, go visit parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking to them on our way back. Me and Cassie are talking about the kind of stories we're talking about now. And I said, mom and dad told me the story one time about this giant owl. And I tell her the same story I just told you about this owl that took a kid. And how if this is the first time you've heard about it, it's going to come and show itself to you. And we're on the back roads between Gregory and Mitchell, South Dakota. And it's not the interstate. It's just like highways and back roads. So I tell her this story, and she does the same thing she does with all of my stories. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm like, hey, it's not my story. I'm just telling you what happened in this story. So you can take this story for whatever it's worth. I don't care. And then we come up to this, like 5 miles down the road, we come up to this 4-way stop. And I actually have a picture of it because I went by there for work not that long ago. And I was like, I better take a picture of this area just so I have it on documentation. And the 4-way stop, we have to take right, head east, because we're heading north. So we had to head east. And on the side of the road, there's this owl, and it's not small at all. This thing, we were in a really crappy 2001 Oldsmobile Alero, and this thing stood about a foot taller than that car. And we're like, are you seeing this fucking owl?
That's amazing.
And she's sitting shotgun, so she's closer to it than I am. And I don't want to just drive by and go. I'm slowly going by this thing. And I'm watching, just going by slower than hell. And she's like, are you serious? Looking at this thing? Like, she's kind of leaning back in her chair already because it's like right next to her window. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the biggest freaking owl I've ever seen. And the entire time the owl's head is just watching us.
Whoa.
So I'm like, man.
On that swivel.
I wonder what happens if I honk. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to know what happens if I honk the horn.
Dead eyes,
is this thing
dude.
fly away?
Owls look dead inside. Like, you look in there. I mean, they're beautiful, but bro, they're murderers.
They're raptors.
They kill everything.
Well, yeah.
And of course, it was doing that creepy owl thing where it was looking like the body was facing this direction, but the entire time its head's like doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like their heads turned like all the way back around. So this thing was like basically waiting for me, it seemed like. So I was like, I'm going to honk the horn. I'm going to honk the horn and see if this thing flies off or what it does. And it's like right next to her car. It is taller than my car. And I'm just like looking at this thing. So I honk the horn and just almost like that noise you hear, that this wings fly out and it just stops and it looked at me like, I'm here.
Wow.
What now? And like she jumped in she was like on the center council at this point. She's like, "Holy crap!" And I'm just like, "What?"
That'd
And like
be me.
the owl never flew off. It just stood there on that spot and just stared us down. And we're like, "You know what?" And then we get down the road, maybe a mile. We're both like, "Holy crap!"
Right.
What was that? And she says, "What are the odds of that happening after you tell me that story?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." And then I'm telling you, the thing had to have been at least 5, almost 6 foot, right around.
That's a big bird.
I've looked into it.
Huge
Owls
bird.
don't get that big.
Right.
The closest thing that I have seen is the harpy eagle, and they're not quite close enough, guys.
Yeah.
These things are huge. This thing was huge.
Right. It's bigger than a harpy eagle, you're saying.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
That's a big owl.
Now, did it look kind of like a horned owl? I mean, what do we?
Nope.
Smooth, kind of
Smooth.
more. Okay,
Like a barn owl?
interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What color
you
was
would think so. It was kind of a lighter color.
it? Okay.
It wasn't like, a lot of the times you think brown. This is almost like grayish, kind of like, I don't know. It wasn't super dark is all I could tell you. It was almost lighter skin.
Well,
like I say skin, but lighter feathered.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well, owls are creepy too, just because they're silent.
Yeah.
Right? Like when they fly,
Yeah.
they are silent.
I mean, remember that time outside of my house? Never seen an owl.
No.
Never heard an owl at my
you
old
won't hear
house.
them. You won't hear them.
We were outside and we're like, oh, maybe we'll do this thing, maybe we won't. And it's like, oh, maybe there's a sign out there.
Right
This
when we said
owl,
that.
right when we say that, this owl flies like the blackness of it was so dark.
You could just see it right across the sky,
and
we're
it
like,
just
okay,
went
well,
whoosh, and it was big, dude.
Yeah,
and
that
it
was the
just
answer.
looked, and it was silent. You could see this thing float right through.
you were like,
and I'm
I've
like,
never seen that.
There's no way that just
Yeah.
happened.
And it did.
And
That's
our
insane.
friend Roa, who's our artist friend of ours that designed and painted the studio and our logo and tattoo
man,
artist.
You guys, your studio is top tier.
Oh,
I'm
thank
not gonna
you.
lie, that's
Thank
beautiful.
you. Yeah. Well, without Roa's help and it's been
he
a
knocked it out of the
team
park.
game. But he has a really interesting connection with owls and birds in general. Yeah. So the fact that, he was there that night, and then I have other owl stories connected with him where he was there. It's just like,
That was my first tattoo, was an owl.
mm-hmm.
There's something about him. Like,
thing came across. I'm like, I've
cool.
never seen an owl at that house. Now, as a kid, we had an owl right outside the locust tree for a whole summer. One whole summer, that thing was out there, hooting, and I used to go to bed to it, and then never again.
Yeah.
Never had an owl.
I wonder if there are many back home. And I mean, I've heard the stories though before of
our
like
buddies would
seeing the owls. I've never heard of the giant owl, but I've heard of like different
But
YouTube
they show
clips
up at
that I've
weird
seen of
times.
speeches. There's a
They show
presenter
up.
that talks about the owls and how they're kind of like a foreshadowing of whatever event.
Yeah.
But this is a different story,
look at
obviously. But-
indigenous cultures all over the world
right.
are complete. The owl is always there.
Well,
It's
they-
always
again,
a
they're
symbol of
magicians.
wisdom.
They manifest out of nowhere
the
a lot
occult,
of times.
the hidden knowledge.
They operate in the shadows.
Yep. And
I
They're
was,
very esoteric.